AI overviews are taking a lot of the traffic away. Google still has 337 times as many search queries as ChatGPT does. And I think that number was probably high, but it is going to change. There's no doubt about it.
What's the biggest misconception SEO practitioners have about generative AI right now?
One of the biggest misconceptions that people have is they try to do too much with AI and they try to automate everything. All we need to do is spew all these prompts into ChatGPT and we'll get thousands of pieces of content and we'll be rich. No, that's a very bad strategy. The right way to integrate generative AI is to think of it as your brainstorming partner. And if you use that way of thinking, it can be very, very powerful. I think if we develop a process that is designed to rank well in LLMs, we will also quite likely rank very well in traditional Google search.
Welcome to the Agency Insider Show, where we explore the strategies shaping digital marketing and agency growth. I'm your host, Navneet Kaushal, and today I'm joining by Eric Enge, 25-year SEO veteran, co-author of The Art of SEO, and also the AI book, which he recently came out with, and the founder of Pilot Holding. Eric has worked with leading brands on advanced SEO, EAT strategies, and now adapting content for the age of AI-driven search. Today, we will explore how to optimize for LLMs, the role of embeddings, and how to implement winning strategies for AI search. Eric, welcome to the Agency Insider Show.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, so let's start with your entrepreneur story. You founded Stone Temple back in 1997. That's almost 3 decades of building an agency. What drove you to start your own firm rather than joining an established agency or a company?
So it actually really has to do with how I grew up. My father was a very famous, a world famous physicist, actually, taught nuclear physics at MIT. Because of that, there were a lot of entrepreneurs swirling around him and getting him engaged in projects. So I saw all these people who owned their own companies. And because of that, I had a natural inclination to own my own company as well.
Okay. So now you founded a Stone Temple before, which you sold, of course, to Proficient in 2018. Now, what factors made you realize it was right time to exit?
It's really quite simple. I'm 68 right now, and in 2018, I was in my 60s already, and I knew that I did not want to be running an agency when I was 70. And we just happened to have a really good company come along that was a good fit for what we were doing, and that we get a good valuation for. So we weren't urgently trying to sell, but the timing was right, and it seemed like the right thing to do.
Okay. And how did you structure the transition to ensure your teams and clients were protected?
So, basically, we had an understanding when we went through the process of the negotiations of the Proficient's intent on how they wanted to use our company, and they kept the great majority of all the employees, and the revenue from the customer base was fundamental to what they wanted to obtain from us. So we knew that those things would be in good shape.
Okay. Now, going back to your Stone Temple times, which you spent most of your working life with. Now, for agency owners listening, what were the 3 biggest operational challenges you faced while scaling Stone Temple, and how did you solve them?
So, it's funny. I'm going to start with the first challenge, which was me. I'm not a natural chief operating officer. and I needed that kind of help. And it turns out that that my wife has excellent skills in that area, and she joined the company and played a big role in our ability to grow to the size that we did. So that was the first challenge. But then there's other things that naturally happen. Like when you're a smaller company, let's say you have 5 people, you can operate in a way that's very casual. But when you grow a little bit more, and maybe even at 10 people, you already need to have certain systems in place. And as you keep growing, you go to 25 people or 50 people. We eventually grew to 70. At each of those stages, you find things that you need to change. There's a time where you need to have a full-time accounting person as an employee. There's a time in which your attention to how you manage projects and the standards that you follow for executing projects need to be documented, and so all of those stages present challenges. So it's really good to have a strong operator with you who can help recognize when those situations are coming up, and you resolve them before you, get in too much trouble.
Okay. Now, what's the biggest change you have had to make in your strategies in the last 3 years?
Well, I'm going to give you a 2-part answer to that, actually. The first part is part of the deal I had with Proficient was that I worked there for 3 years to help with the integration. But then in 2021, that came to an end, and I went off on my own, and I spend some of my time doing things that don't relate to the industry at all. I make furniture for my children. I golf. So these are things I do, but I'm still, very much engaged in the industry. But it's very different being, working as a solo operator, as I do now, compared to being a part of an agency with 50 to 70 people.
Wow. Okay. Now let's jump into the AI revolution in SEO, which exactly we are in right now. Now, in one of your talk with Search Engine Land, you have discussed how AI-driven search changes the meaning of rank. Now, what's the biggest mindset shift needed to understand that?
So, well, I think the conversation really breaks into a few pieces.
Okay.
We have the impact on Google search, as we have known and loved it. We have the impact of AI overviews. And then we have the impact of people using ChatGPT or AI mode within Google search, or some other platform. And they're all very different challenges. If we stick with Google search for the moment, even that's a complicated topic. But AI overviews are taking a lot of the traffic away. And Google will tell us that, well, you might get less traffic, but it will be better traffic and it will convert better. And that proves to be true for some businesses and not true for others. And I think that's the first big challenge that we are looking at. And it's understanding how to adapt your strategy for getting the most benefit you can out of that ecosystem, and also to figure out how to measure the benefit you're getting from that ecosystem. And I think that's the first part that's very complex to handle. So there's other parts, but I'm going to let you ask another question before I dive into them.
Yes, right. Now, So your new book, Using Generative AI for SEO, just came out. And what's the biggest misconception SEO practitioners have about generative AI right now?
Well, the book is very focused on operationalizing how to use generative AI to grow SEO, right?
Okay.
And I think one of the biggest misconceptions that people have is they they try to do too much with AI,
Okay.
and they try to automate everything. Or I remember when it first came out, people were saying, "Oh, we don't need writers anymore," and we have hundreds of writers at our fingertips. All we need to do is spew all these prompts into ChatGPT, and we'll get thousands of pieces of content, and we'll be rich. Yeah, no, that's a very bad strategy. So the right way to integrate generative AI is to think of it as your brainstorming partner. And if you use that way of thinking, it can be very, very powerful and help companies significantly improve their operations. So the way I like to think about it, imagine I told you, let's back up 5 years ago, and I came to
Okay.
you and I said, hey, I have this thing which will allow you to reduce the cost of producing content by 25%. And you're going to increase your throughput by 30%. And your quality is going to go up by 20%. And you'd look at me like I had three heads and say, you're an idiot. That thing can't be invented, right?
Right.
Well, it has been. And if you have those more modest goals, rather than thinking you're going to create 5 times as much content at 20% of the cost, which is the road to ruin. All your content is eventually going to be really quite poor to do that. But those more modest goals, you can get such a big advantage over your competition, and that's the thing that I think people need to focus on.
Okay. Now, let's talk a bit more about LLM optimization specifically. Now, you mentioned this is different from traditional SEO, which of course it is. Now, can you break down for our agency audience, what does optimizing content for large language models actually look like in practice?
So that's a very deep and complex question. So I'm going to try to start at the top level and hopefully keep it simple to start.
Right.
The first part is you have to understand how relevance is determined. Okay, and that means understanding what an embedding is, and the role that plays. And I know you have a question for me on that, so I'm not going to go too deep on it yet. But then there's a few other components that are involved in this. One is the fact that LLMs do much more personalization than search. And we should have a whole conversation on that. We should talk about in a minute. And then LLMs have a much more complex model for deciding what they want the final output to look like. And as part of that, there's a technique called query fan out, where they take your original prompt and they synthetically generate many more prompts, which, just to simplify what it's all about, they don't want to simply answer the direct question the user asked. They want to try to answer what's most likely the next 2 or 3 questions after that.
Right.
Right. And that's what this query fan out thing is. And that's a whole conversation we should have. And then the final piece, which is how do you get picked as a source for their response? And how do you get a citation? And there's no comprehensive answer to that last piece, but there's pretty good guidance we can provide. So those are the major areas that I think we should talk about.
Okay. Now, you mentioned initially embedding. So, for a marketers who don't have a machine learning background, what are embeddings in plain English?
So it's a way to use math to capture some amount of text, which can be a word, what we call a passage, which is kind of a sentence or two or a phrase that discusses a single concept, or a page or a website or about. So just think of some quantity of text. Let's just start with a word or a search phrase, right?
Okay.
Imagine we could generate some math which would capture the semantic meaning of that phrase. Well, it turns out that there is math that does that.
Okay.
And what's cool about the math, let's just take a word for the moment. Imagine that the word is hat, like
Okay.
a hat that you put on your head. And then imagine we have another word. There, I have a prop. Cap.
Right.
Okay. Um, so I've got two words. They're obviously very closely related to each other. And the nature of this math, this embeddings math, is that it creates vectors which represent each of those two words. And in the case of those two words, because their semantic meaning is very close, if you were to draw them on a chart and imagine what their vectors look like, they would be very close to each other, like my two fingers. Okay. And you can calculate how close they are. And so the math, and the listeners don't need to worry about the details of the math. But what they need to know is the way the math works is because those things are semantically very close in meaning, the math shows that, and it shows a very small distance between these two vectors. All right, and so there's great power in this because it allows you to determine relevance at scale, like Google scale, in a very efficient way.
Okay.
And the LLMs and traditional Google search both use embeddings, but in slightly different ways.
Okay. Now, you also spoken about how Google uses embedding vector to determine relevance. Now, for agencies working with, especially with enterprise clients, how should they be thinking about this technology?
So if you think about this idea, in fact, the idea being what Google does, and now I'm talking traditional Google search. We'll get to the
Okay.
LLM piece
Okay.
in a moment, but in
Right.
traditional Google search, what Google does is it takes the search phrase, 1, 2, 3, 7 words, however many it
Right.
is. It creates a vector, an embedding for that. And then it takes a web page, which is potentially relevant to that search phrase, and has already pre-generated an embedding for that.
Okay.
Okay. And using the math I spoke about, it can determine whether or not the search phrase is closely related to the page or vice versa.
Okay.
Okay. So it can select relevant pages. And this makes the building of a search engine very efficient because they can do it at scale. But now let's think about it from our perspective. Let's say I have a piece of content and I have a target search phrase for that page. Here's the
Okay.
main search phrase I want that page to rank for. Okay.
Okay.
Well, I can do the math. Okay. Or there's tools you can use. You can do this with Screaming Frog, for example.
Right.
You can do the math and see whether your embedding score is good. And without worrying about the details of all the calculations, just for sake of argument, let's say you want to have a score of 0.8 or better. And it goes from +1 to -1. And you want, and 0.8 is very close. It's a high relevance, right?
Okay.
Now, as the owner of this website, I can go back to my web page and figure out, well, what can I do to make my embedding score better?
Right.
What if I could make that 0.8 a 0.85? Well, in the process, I'm increasing my relevance. We can do this math. There are tools that help us do this. And by studying competing websites that have higher relevance scores, and doing other brainstorming, you can figure out how to make your page get a higher relevance score, and you can drive improved search rankings systematically by developing a process for doing this.
Okay. So does the backlinks factors into this, or it's just if I increase my embedded score, will I start getting more visibility in LLMs?
So I'm sorry, you asked about backlinks too?
No, I've said that it just by increasing the embedded score of my web page, will I start getting more visibility in LLMs?
Potentially, but there are three other things to think about with LLMs.
Okay.
So let's start with the first one,
Okay.
which is personalization. Okay.
Right.
So Google, of course, does some personalization.
Right.
For various reasons, they've held back in using it as much as they could have. Whereas LLMs do a lot more personalization. First of all, they look at your recent prompt history much more extensively than
Right.
Google does. Google
Right.
does it, but it's limited. And I think in the structure of Google search, it didn't work at scale as well as you might have thought it would, because people go in different directions pretty rapidly. But the way that people interact with LLMs is a bit different. So there tends to be chains of prompts or queries that they do. So leveraging that history is one big thing. Location obviously is the devices they're on, but also other things about their profile. So let me give you an example. Let's imagine that there's a woman who regularly interviews famous race car drivers.
Okay.
Okay. And she does the prompt, tell me about the life of Danny Sullivan. She's probably going to get a response in an LLM related to Danny Sullivan, the famous race car driver, because that's what her profile suggests based on her background, right? And the website she visits and where she's mentioned online. If I do that search, I'm going to get a response about the Danny Sullivan in the search industry. Now working at Google, recently promoted, by the way,
Yes.
within Google. But congratulations, Danny. So LLMs do a lot more with that. So let's just briefly talk about what do we do with that as an information? How does that impact what we do with our content? What's probably really smart to do, or what is very smart to do, is think about the 2 or 3 major use cases for different users that they might have in their brain when they arrive in their web page, on your web page. So, and try to address more than one. Because normally what people creating content do is they have a very straight line way of thinking. Here's my outline, I'm going to put all this in here. And they're not really thinking about the 2 or 3 specific types of people who might be arriving at that web page and fashioning the page so it addresses each of those, yet while keeping the content in a cohesive fashion. So it sounds like it makes the writing a little bit more complex. And it does, but not a lot more complex. It's just an extra step.
Okay. Now, with AI overviews and tools like ChatGPT, Perplexity gaining traction, are we looking at a fundamental shift in how user discovers content, and what should be agencies be preparing their clients for?
Yeah, great question. I think we are seeing a big shift, but it's not going as fast as our emotion makes us think it is.
Okay.
Not too long ago, Rand Fishkin published a study that suggested that Google still has 337 times as many search queries as ChatGPT does.
Right.
Um, and I think that number was probably high, but I believe 100 times. And 100 times is a lot more, right? Um, so at this moment, Google is still very much the big dog, right?
Right.
But um, but it is going down. It is going to change. There's no doubt
Right.
about it. We
Right.
look at um, SoftBank and other investors that recently put $40 billion into OpenAI at a valuation of 300 billion, which, by the way, is already about 1/7 the valuation of Google, which 1/7 doesn't sound like a large percentage, but OpenAI isn't profitable. They're losing a ton of money, and there isn't really a clear vision as to how they're going to become profitable, as far as I know, right? So that's a huge valuation, but people see it coming. And as the technology, the current AI and the types of AI, because I expect there's going to be new types of AI that will come into this too, as all that evolves, they see that this is coming, and Google sees it's coming. And that's why Google scrambled so quickly to try to, catch up. And so, and the other thing to think about is AI mode. Once Google decides to more fully integrate that into Google search than they do right now, right? And they're gradually increasing it. You can see it. Um, they're going to drive massive volume in this kind of environment before ChatGPT will. All they have to do is flip the switch, and they'll have it, right? And so, but they're being careful, and they have the luxury of being careful, but they also have great urgency behind them. So let's go back and talk about the agency question you asked me. I
Right.
wanted to give all that background. I would say much the same as I did and tell my clients, look, this is coming and we have to get ready. Is it going to be the dominant form of search in a year? That's probably too soon to say that it will be the dominant form of search in a year. Um, but it's going to start to eat in and take significant share. And, we'll get to the 10-15% range first. That's already important. And it's also driving change in Google search. So some of the things we need to do to optimize for LLMs are going to be very much what we're going to need to do to optimize in Google search. So long-winded answer, my apologies for that. But what it means is we need to think differently about how we create content. And there are two other pieces to optimizing for LLMs that I haven't talked about yet. We need to make sure we get to the query fan out piece and how citations and links are implemented in LLM responses.
Right. So let's talk about query fan out pages and how does that work and what. So you explained how query fan out is, but is there a way practically for a user, it will look like, okay, if there is a synthetic queries which are 10, and if I can rank for all those synthetic queries, then I can rank for the main query as well. Is that simple or complex than that?
It's you're definitely in the right direction.
Okay.
So just one qualifier in what you said, but I think it's very much the right thought process. So what happens is the LLM, this is based on Google patents, but we believe the ChatGPT is going down a very similar direction. But the LLM, as I mentioned earlier, is trying to anticipate the next 2 or 3 questions that the user will have beyond the one contained in the original prompt. So they're trying to make their response more comprehensive. So what they do is they generate entirely without user input additional queries to gather even more data. So this is first they build an initial response to the user query, then they go and do many more queries. So what are they looking for? Major subtopics of the original query, common next questions, other ways of determining related queries, customization based on the user profile. All these things go into synthetic queries. So, and how many they generate varies, but imagine 8, 10, something like this, and then they gather all this additional data. So then there's a process by which they decide what of that information they want to include in the final response. And so during that process, they eliminate some of the returned pages to the synthetic queries, and they may even rule out some of the synthetic queries and not include them. So they go through a decision process to decide what the final response will be. And if your content is supports a substantial amount of the final response, which include, based on the original query and some of the synthetic queries, that's how you get a citation and a link, or improve your chances.
Okay. Now let's. I'm going to come back on the citations, the backlink in this section, which is mainly about generative engine optimization, which people call GEO as of now. I don't know what we're going to settle eventually with, but so there is a growing talk about GEO, which we see every day on, GEOs, LLMs, and search everywhere optimization, you name it, we have it. Now, some people say it's just a rebranded SEO. Other claims it's an entirely new discipline. Now, what's your take on it?
Yeah, that's a question which people debate with a great deal of emotion.
Yes.
Well, honestly, I think if we develop a process that is designed to rank well in LLMs, we will also quite likely rank very well in traditional Google search.
Right.
So, but that's not because I believe that GEO and SEO are the same thing. It just turns out that GEO, because it's still using embedding concepts that we talked about, using them slightly differently, and we could talk about that for a few moments too, how LLMs use embeddings differently. But there's a lot of overlap. And I think if you create content designed to rank in LLMs, that it's actually better content. You can create some pretty poor quality content that will rank well in traditional Google search. Well, that will score high with an embedding score in Google search, I should say. Google search has a different element, which is how they use user engagement as a part of determining ranking. And so if you create poor quality content, even if it gets a high embedding score for the target search query, the user engagement will be poor, and that'll drag down the rankings, at least eventually. But that's a kind of a crude system compared to what LLMs do. So I
Okay.
didn't actually answer the original question. So what do I think about? Do I call it GEO? Do I call it SEO? Do I call it EO? And I don't have any first letter, or little x, capital EO. I've seen all these things. I don't worry about it that much. I kind of focus on what it is that I need to do.
Right.
I'm happy to call it GEO if that's what the client wants to call it. But I think it is important for people to realize that the way we think of what the term SEO means is not going to play well with LLMs. So we can change what we're doing and still call it SEO if we want, or we can call it GEO because we change what we're doing. Not that important to me.
All right. Now, for agencies, what are 3 most important strategies they should implement right now to optimize content for LLMs or GEO?
So the first is to understand the profiles of the different users coming to their site. And
Right.
I want to try to clarify that a little bit. So let's say I've got a page selling lawnmowers.
Okay.
Okay. And somebody enters a query, asking about lawnmowers. So there may be different things that people are thinking about when they come to your webpage. So some might be oriented, and I'm going to be very general with this example because I didn't think it through in advance. Somebody might have in mind that they want a riding mower, and somebody else, might want an old-fashioned push motor mower because their lawn is small. Okay, and so you want your page to rapidly help those people get headed in the direction that they want to go in, right? So understanding different user needs at that level is important, very important in the LLM world.
Okay.
So that's the first piece. The second piece is understanding how to create more comprehensive content. And it turns out that there's a way to capture query fanouts. If you use Gemini 2.5 Flash, that API, you can get the query fanouts that are representative of what AI overviews use.
Okay.
And if you use Gemini 2.5, I think I remember, Pro, that API, you get the query fanouts that AI mode uses.
Wow.
Now, keep in mind, every time you do the same prompt, say in AI mode, the query fanout isn't identical. It has variance in it. But if you do a couple or 3 of them, you can see a wide range, really probably the bulk of what the query fanout is likely to show you. So learning or building your own tool or getting access to one of the tools out there that will do that for you. And I apologize, I don't have the name of one right off the top of my head. I know an agency that does it, but I don't want to give a competing agency name show and on a show targeting other agencies. So, or they can call me and I can help you show you how to build it. But yeah, getting access to that information, incredibly valuable for your content development. Oh, and by the way, I'm a huge fan of using AI to help with content development,
Okay.
using it as your brainstorming partner. So you can take that query fan out data, okay,
Okay.
and that persona data and feed it into your process for generating outlines, sample drafts, content summarization, whatever it might be. And you can put that into a chain of things, which can give you a great deal of leverage in your content creation process.
Okay.
So if I were running a larger agency today, other than just instead of being a solo operator as I am now, I would be building that right away.
Okay. So when you talk about the content, so what is, you talked about giving it to your process and generating an outline. So in today's world, I mean, because we all know that a lot of people went out and started generating content with AI. There is still a debate out there: AI content ranks or AI content doesn't rank. Now, I just want to understand: is there a specific process you follow while generating content, and which all area AI is involved while generating a content?
So my preferred model, assuming I want to actually break out one separate use case. If all you're trying to do is content summarization, you can have your LLM of choice. You can feed it the content. Let's say you want a video transcript, for example. You can feed it in the LLM, chunk it out, have it provide you a draft final response for your content summary. Right. Scan it quickly, good to go. Okay, right. Very simple. If you're trying to create original content, I'm more conservative. I would use my generative AI tool to create multiple outlines for me. I typically think of 3.
Okay.
And I would have one of my subject matter experts take the 3 outlines and integrate it into one master outline.
Okay.
Then I would do some supplemental things. I would have it give me information on the latest trends. I would have it go dig up information on statistics or background facts, and accumulate a lot of information. And so gather a lot of this data automatically, right?
Okay.
And then have now you have one of 2 choices. You can then feed all of that information into an LLM and create a content draft. If the piece of content is relatively short, then that can work well, and you can have someone do an edit pass. If it's a longer piece of content, I would actually then give that to a subject matter expert and have them take it from there. Because the longer the content is, the more likely the errors are. So there's one other thing I want to mention, though, is if you use AI to a larger degree, the amount of human review you need to do goes up. So, and it's really important to understand that. And so a lot of this, by the way, is what we talk about in the book. This whole thing we're talking about right now is how to get started with all this.
So when you said a smaller piece of content and a longer piece of content, now how many typical words would you mean a smaller would be?
100, 200 words.
Okay.
I think you can take the AI further into the process before you have final human review. And 500 words, I wouldn't even go there personally.
Okay. Now, and I am sure when you said you have AI come out with latest stats and everything, it means you would be using Perplexity more than any other of the LLMs.
Yeah, Perplexity is definitely a good choice, but I mean, ChatGPT in AI mode do a pretty good job with it too.
Okay. All right. Now, you also mentioned that LLM favors well-structured, facts-based content that consistently mentioned across the web. So can you give us a specific example of how an agency should restructure existing content?
Okay, so you asked for a specific example. You made the question a lot trickier. But well, I mean, the first thing I would do, and we already talked about this part of it, is I would take the content and I would do the relevance analysis we talked about in terms of the embedding score versus the target prompt or the target query.
You will at this stage take the fan out queries as well?
So ideally, yes, although understand that your subtopics, that are brought up in the fan out queries are probably going to score somewhat lower for relevance because the subtopic is only a section of the page. There's a lot of other stuff on the page, but it should still show relevance there. So I would do that. And so that's the first thing I would do. And then I would go ahead and generate the fan outs using the Gemini 2.5 Pro or 2.5 Flash. As I mentioned, it depends on what your target is.
Right.
AI mode or AI overviews. And I would do that, and I would go get that data. And so you need to have access to a tool to do this.
Okay.
If you don't have it now, buy it or build it. And in terms of when you buy it or build it, start working on it this week. That's what I would do. No time like the present to get going on that.
Okay.
But I would just work that process to figure out how to fill gaps and improve the relevance of the page to both LLMs and Google at the same time.
Okay. Now, when you mention using Gemini Flash or for fan out queries, so the question most of the people have is this process gonna make me rank good in ChatGPT and other LLMs, or I need to do something different besides what we are talking about?
Yeah. Well, the fan out that 2.5 Flash generates is more related to AI overviews.
Yes.
Which is not quite the same as a full LLM. It's not as powerful. So the short answer to your question is no, it is not enough. And you'll want to use the 2.5 Pro API, and that'll generate a more complete fan out, which is what Gemini uses, which is what AI mode uses. Again, not exactly the same because it's different every time, as we know. And it should be very similar to what ChatGPT does.
Okay, so do you have an experience where you have taken the same content and used the same process which we are just talking about, and it has made difference in both ChatGPT and in AIO or AI over?
So the example I can give you is, and I have two of them. Unfortunately, I can't name the companies, but these are real case studies. So they were both companies whose website traffic was in decline.
Okay.
And they had been in decline for some time. One of them took existing content and went through the optimization process that I spoke about and improved the embedding scores against target queries. It had dropped roughly half its traffic over a period of a year and a half. And they optimized their most important pages, about 100 of them, and saw within 30 days of those optimizations, the traffic had already turned around and returned to growth. And they were back up about 20% and still growing just from doing this kind of analysis. A very, very nice result. The other one's a little bit of a different case study. And it's an interesting one because it relates to a different, it's related to relevance, but it was more based on deleting low relevance pages. So this was a site with probably 2,500 web pages, something like that.
Okay.
It had also been in decline for a substantial amount of time, year and a half, 2 years. We, working with them, we came to the difficult decision to delete 2/3 of their pages.
Wow.
2/3. And it was a new site section that they had added because they wanted to get into a new market. Okay. So what was happening is the 2/3 of the pages, they weren't performing well. And because of that, they dragged down the rankings of the entire site.
Right.
Okay. So deleting 2/3 of their content, it was, again, this is like within 45 or so days, traffic began going up. They are close to traffic records right now. So a very dramatic turnaround. And I think they lost 2/3 of their traffic in the long decline. So attending to all this relevance stuff it's so important.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in this case of the second company where you actually pruned the content, was the AI anywhere? Does it help in the AI overview ranking as well?
So the site, and as you know, measurement in AI overviews, like AI mode, it's tricky, right?
Yes.
So the response is not as clean as the analytics of just traffic, right? But it's our belief that we have seen a significant growth in presence in AI overviews in the process. Yeah.
Okay. And when you said you took out 2/3 of these pages, so was there a specific method you took while recognizing these low value content?
So the tricky part for anybody who tries to enter a new market, because that's what was going on, is from a Google perspective, you need to kind of establish that you're relevant, that you are an authority on something. And this is where traditional backlinks, from other third parties matter, user engagement matters. These are all things that matter in that environment. And if you fail to do that, your new content won't rank and it can drag down the rest of your site. So, sorry, and I forgot the original question. I knew I wanted to go down this path in answering it. But that's what caused us to pick what to remove.
Okay.
Is recognizing that.
Okay. So because normally, usually what we recommend is go to Google Search Console, see if your last 6 months, if there are no clicks on that particular page and you see these are low value content, you might prune it. So that's how it recommend, right?
Fundamentally, yes, except you've scaled to a whole section of a site.
Right. That's just a different, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's talk about citations. Seems to be the new backlinks in the LLM world. Now, how should agencies approach building citations worthy content differently than they approach traditional link building?
So it really gets back to understanding the query fan out and
Right.
leveraging those two APIs I talked about.
Right.
Right. For LLMs, go with the AI mode one, which is Gemini 2.5 Pro.
Right.
Uh, and, and looking at the fan out, and ideally, generate, especially for your most important pages, like,
Mm-hmm.
generate 8 fan outs or 10, and see the most common themes, and make sure your content covers those pieces, because those most common themes in the fan out are probably going to show up in future fan outs, but in future prompts done by other users. So coverage of that is what's critical.
Okay. Now, is there a tool which does, or somebody has to start making? Is there a tool out which would do this for me, or is that I have to do it using build my own tool, as you said? Or are you aware of a tool which helps do that?
So at the moment, I'm not aware of a tool from a tool vendor.
Mm-hmm.
I know a couple of agencies that have their own tools,
Okay.
and I can give the name of those agencies if you want me to. I'm just mindful that we have a lot of agencies
It's
listening.
okay. Right. I just thought that if there is a tool which our subscribers can look into. No problem. Of course, I understand now. In fact, it's easier these days to build your own tools with the no vibe coding. So I definitely say build your own.
Yes.
Yes, it is. Now, so now let's take back to the citation. So there are synthetic queries, and are there synthetic citations?
So I don't think of it as synthetic citations. I think about it. Let me see if I can outline it.
Mhm.
You have your original prompt, right?
Mm.
That's right over here, the original
Right,
prompt. And
right,
then you have a whole series of incremental prompts,
right.
synthetic. And then the LLM goes through a process which we call reasoning to figure out what it's actually going to put in the final response.
Right.
And based on that, it's going to use the original prompt and some of these prompts and the responses it got to build the final response.
Okay.
So the trick is to recognize the most common synthetic prompts
Or the fan out query.
of the fan outs. Yeah.
Right, right.
And if your content covers that and adds value such that the LLM chooses you to build the final response, then
Mm-hmm.
they'll show up not in a synthetic citation, but the real citation in the final response. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah. So what my question intended was, let's say I want to rank for a particular query. I already have used the fan out queries. I've already built the content, but now the content my page needs to have citations. Unless if there's no citations, it might not rank. It's just like traditional link building. So is it possible for me to generate press releases, have guest posts done basically based on those or create synthetic or artificial citations linking back to my page?
Oh,
Is
I
that some?
see.
Yeah.
Um, uh, yeah, I think I'd say that's tricky. The LLMs are much more selective in how they think about citations than how we think about Google in certainly in the old days and even
Right.
today.
Right.
Um, so there's a much bigger premium on what you can accomplish with um, really well thought out marketing campaigns where you get interviewed by major media, and these are the kinds of things that you want to try to do. I don't think that the guest posts are going to get very far with LLMs, for example.
Okay. So we can safely assume SEO or GEO in the coming year is going to be an expensive thing to do.
Yeah.
Because you have to build everything. If I want to be getting interviewed by a major publication, or I want to do a digital PR, that's not going to be a cheaper one.
Right.
So
yeah, and there's ways to make it, cheaper. Like if certainly on the content creation side, for a long time, it's been a very successful strategy to create useful data that people want to write about, and LLMs can totally help you figure that out. What data would be useful, and B, how to get it. Still not a cheap process, as you say, but the most difficult process of doing all of this before LLMs has been identifying the need, and the LLMs could potentially help us identify the need. So in the past, you might have had to do, say, 4 data-driven research studies to have one get some good citations, and you might be able to do a lot fewer of those to get some citations. So, there's still leverage there.
Okay. Now, with tools like, of course, Search GPT, Chat GPT, and AI-powered search becoming more prevalent, how do you see Search Escape changing in the next 2 years, and specifically with the AI agents coming in? So is there a day when we're going to be not optimizing for human, but we're going to be actually optimizing for AI agents?
Well, that's a good question. So my belief is that each of the companies that are building these tools, let's first of all, before we talk about AI agents, talk about OpenAI and Google and Anthropic and Perplexity and all those people. All of them ultimately have to optimize for real users.
Right.
So when we start using AI agents more and more to do things for us, but we still want real users as customers, the AI agents need to be built to give real users what they want.
Right.
So I do think that the target is still real users.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. There will be limitations in AI agents, which we will learn that we need to optimize for.
Right.
But we can't forget that they're the end goal of the companies making them, because their agents won't get applied and used if they don't serve real users in the end. Right. So the real users will remain a foundational thing that we can't forget. And then we need to learn the limitation of the agents and understand how that impacts us.
Okay. Now, does the LLMs, do you think, of course, it has impacted SaaS products, it has impacted content websites as such, affiliate network. How do you see this coming effect into a local SEO or a Google map, or is it still too far, or are we seeing signs where you might get the same things into the Google Maps or a local SEO part?
So, yeah, that's a great question. And I got to be honest, I haven't thought about, well, I did think about it just the other day, just a little bit. And I was like, there's so much data in building something like Google Maps. And the other very large player here in the United States is Apple Maps.
Right.
Is about half the size of Google Maps, but that's still very significant. That's a little harder for AI tools or AI agents to replicate right now. So near term, I'm not convinced it's going to happen quickly. Will it happen eventually? Of course. It's just I'm not, Is it in the next 3 years? Yeah, it'll probably start, you know,
Okay.
but yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking about it.
Because I can see when we search in ChatGPT, let's say best Cairo practitioner in a particular city, I mean, it has started showing up specifically in ChatGPT where you could influence those. And of course, hopefully they are taking it from Bing Maps, but I can see those things influencing there right now. Even in AI overview, you sometimes see the summary and then you see the Google Map results below it. So I think they are testing it, but it's because large part of the searches still goes to the local and we still rely on Google Map for that. So that is something which
Yeah.
will, I'm sure, will gonna play out very interestingly.
Yeah, I agree. But even when you see a local result, you can do the same thing in AI mode or Gemini. You can, I almost said Genesis, but anyway, Gemini. You can do a, where's the local restaurants, and it'll give you a result. It's taken directly verbatim from Google Maps. It's not, it's not an AI based analysis of all that data.
So there is no
It's just,
fan-out query when it comes to local right now.
yeah, it's just being pulled directly in. So.
Right. Okay. Okay. Now, so let's get technical. What are the top 3 AI tools or application that every AI SEO agency should be using right now?
So, yeah, that's a great question. So, I only have a partial answer for you.
Okay.
And because at this point in time, I mean, I'm obviously still using a lot of tools, but there's people who are a lot deeper into the specifics of them. But Screaming Frog,
The
because
new
of
version is,
their ability, the way they use embeddings and to give you
yes.
those embedding scores. Mind you, Screaming Frog's embedding score isn't against your target search query. It's against the term or phrase that Screaming Frog believes that you're most relevant to. But it's still very useful data, and you can get it, very quickly, and it's a great place
Right.
to start.
Okay.
So other than that, I mean, I'm still using things like SEMrush and Ahrefs and those tools, but those guys have got to evolve, and they know,
Yes.
they're all working on it.
Yes. You're right. So for the Agency Insider Show audience, agency owners and leaders, what's the one capability they absolutely must build in the next 12th month to stay competitive?
Well, I think it's without a doubt, it's understanding how to optimize content for LLMs.
Okay.
The reason why I give the answer that way is because I believe that will also create great content for Google search, and you've got
Okay.
everything covered if you do that.
Okay. All right. And if you are starting an agency today, that's my last question of the day. If you are starting an agency today, knowing what you know about AI and the future of search, how would you structure it differently? Your agency.
AI native. I mean, AI would be baked into how we build our operations.
Okay.
It would be baked into day-to-day living. Humans still have a huge role to play, but they all need to, all employees need to be competent and very inclined to leverage AI tools in the things they do.
Okay.
You have to do that because not only does it bring you a lot of leverage, but you'll start trying to get it to do one thing and you'll realize it can do an entirely different thing. Oh my
Right.
God, this will save me so much time. And yeah.
Okay.
So.
All right. And Eric, this has been an incredible, valuable session. And before we wrap up, tell us about your current work with Pilot Holdings and what you are most excited about right now.
So, as I mentioned, I'm now a what we call a solopreneur.
Right.
Not trying to build a new agency. Um, not hiring anybody, but just working with people who are trying to face some of these new challenges, trying to help them operationalize AI, still perform well in search, get ready for LLMs as it becomes more and more important, and love working on those problems. I'm a technical geek still, and love solving problems.
Okay. Eric, and with that, we came to the end of the show. And thank you for sharing your insights with the Agency Insider Show audience. And of course, I loved your takes on the AI, and specifically sharing that how you can use Gemini while getting out fan out queries. And thank you once again.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on the show.
Okay. And to our listeners, the future of search, of course, is here, and it's powered by AI. The question isn't whether to adapt, but how quickly you can go ahead of the curve. Until next time, keep building, keep learning, and keep leading. Thank you.